Well, hey everyone, welcome to your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. I'm Beth.
And I'm Jeff.
And we are so excited to have you guys here today. We have been walking through the Triads on the Centers of Intelligence, and we have talked about the head, the heart, and now we're going to do the gut, which is types 8, 9, and 1. And just to kind of give you a brief overview, the gut triad has an imbalance in their gut instincts, but they share different assets and liabilities surrounding their gut instincts. And for them, they can struggle with the emotion of anger. Now, it looks different for each of them. The 8s are going to see injustices and they're going to respond viscerally in a fast manner. And I'll explain a little bit more of this when we get into each of the types. Now, 9s, on the other hand, they're kind of asleep to their anger and they don't want it to disrupt their peace and harmony. So they kind of just ignore it.
I know we're going to talk about it later, but I am not asleep to your anger.
We will definitely talk about that
very
later.
awake when your anger
Well,
is
and I
present.
think as we grow, if we're really doing our work, especially the 9s, we're going to start to see it.
Yeah, and I use a line a lot, and this is especially true for 9s, and we'll get into it later. But if it's not messy, you're not doing it right. And even for I'm getting ahead of ourselves. Too
I know
eager
the
to talk
9s too
about it.
well.
I have so much encouragement for 9s, and I'll encourage the 8s and 1s too.
So
'cause I know
we'll talk about how 9s are unaware or asleep to their anger, and then the type 1s, they feel that anger is wrong and bad, and so they're going to repress that. But it's going to kind of leak out and being a little picky or nitpicky, critical, maybe kind of some judgments landing on other people. But their primary desire, so the common desire that the three of these share, is justice. Now, 8s don't want to see the innocent harmed or betrayed. And so they will step in to protect those that are experiencing injustice. Now, the 9s, they feel overlooked and unimportant, and they don't want anyone else to feel overlooked or unimportant. And so they will want to help mediate and step in and to let the light shine on others that they might feel are being overlooked. Now, the type 1s, they don't want to see unethical injustice taking place. And so they want to point out what is wrong and inaccurate, and they want things to be addressed and fixed. Now, our personality develops strategies in attempts to compensate for our types imbalances. But knowing how we are imbalanced allows us then to work through some of those imbalances and bring out the strengths that we have. All right, so let's introduce the 3 types that are here: the type 8, the type 1, and the type 9.
So first up, we're going to start with the 8. Libby Cole, welcome. We're so glad that you're here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Well, I have been a certified Enneagram coach through your program for almost 3 years now. I'm the
Yay.
owner of Expand Coaching and Consulting. And through that, my primary goal is really working with teams and companies. I'm using the Enneagram as a tool, but it's all about helping people be more self aware, having
Mhm.
better interpersonal effectiveness, right? And how they can be more effective as a team. And
Mhm.
so, really loving all of this. And next month is my anniversary. So, thank y'all so much
That is,
for getting me
that
on
is
this
so
path.
fun, Libby.
Oh, it's a joy. It's such a joy just to hear, how you transitioned so quickly, and I think that's such a testament to the skill sets, the talents, the passion of the 8. You were like, "Hey, let's do this." And you just made it happen, which was really fun to hear and see, and just the ripple effects that we know that it's had on other people's lives.
Cool. And next up is our type 9. Now we have 2 Christies on the call, so you'll hear me refer to Christy with a K or Christy with a C just to differentiate. So Christy with a K, Christy Erickson, we're so glad that you've joined us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I feel like I could say pretty much what Libby said. I've been a certified Enneagram coach through you guys also, doing that for 3 years. And I'm the owner of Overflow Enneagram Coaching
Mm.
and all the same things. I just enjoy it. I love working one-on-one with coaching clients, and I work with teams and leaders.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, Christy, you had mentioned the word overflow as the title of your business. Libby, did you use the word expand or expansive?
Expand is my company.
Yeah. Oh man. See, I love that.
Yeah.
Even in the name of our coaching businesses, that you're starting to see Enneagram types come out.
Mhm.
So Christy with a C, Christy Mishler, we're so glad that you've joined us today. Now, please tell us the name of your
And this
coaching
is the type
business,
1.
and this is the Type 1. So welcome. We're glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Thank you. Well, I coach women for total transformation and mind, body, and spirit so they can live their best life. And I, of course, too, went through your Enneagram coach training. And I've been a coach, an Enneagram coach for less than a year, but a life and health coach for over 8 years. And I own my own fitness studio where I also do personal training and Christ centered yoga.
Oh, great.
Now, Chris, what's the name of your coaching business?
Kristi Mishler Coaching is, and then I
Okay.
have that's doing business as, and then I have Fitness Training Unlimited for my
Yeah.
studio.
Gotcha, got you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Not as much of a direct correlation that I was hoping for, but, but it's still Christy Mishler is the perfect name. It's
Yes,
the right name for your
it's the
coaching
right name.
business.
Yes. That's awesome.
No.
Well, good. Well, let's dive right in. We're going to do type 8 first. And so I'll just give a little bit more of a background of type 8s being in the gut triad. Now, when type 8s are doing well, they have this incredible instinctual intuition in seeing the possibilities and the talents of others and where really to put them on the right seats of the bus. Like they just have this knack, this instinctual knowing, which is great because then they can plow a path for these people to live out their best calling and to lead them and guide them. But they also, when they're struggling, they can relate to the world with a little bit more resistance. They're wanting to control the external environment. They don't want the external environment challenging them, controlling them, betraying them, harming them. And so you're going to see them start to kind of repress their internal fears and vulnerabilities and show a little bit more of aggressive energy or assertive energy, which really underneath is this anger or this passion to really kind of dominate the immediate environment. Now, it doesn't always mean that it's big and bad and this big anger. It's just passion. It's an intensity that is there. Now, obviously, if you're not doing well, it is going to come out with more assertive anger, but we just want to paint that picture that anger isn't always wrong or bad. I think, we get trained in our society that anger is bad and wrong. But if you think of it as more as passion and energy, it kind of helps you to see it from a different light. I mean, Jesus himself was angry in the
Mhm.
temple. He was passionate that people use the temple, his God's house, in the right way. But because type 8s can repress their softer side, they can lose the ability to offer people this intuition of trust and vulnerability. Now, how this can look and appear for type 8s, we call type 8s the big diesel snowplows that you find up in the Midwest where there's just a lot of snow. And the reason why we call them snowplows is because at the root of their heart, they really want to help others and plow a path for them, which is so amazing. So when they're healthy, you're like, yeah, let me get behind that 8 because they've got me. But when they're not so healthy, they can start to nix the cars on the side of the road or plow right over them. And so, what this looks like from a gut reaction is that, like I said earlier, the type 8s have this gut knowing, this gut instinct of what is the best path for you to go down or the best seat on the bus. And so that is amazing. We want to be behind them. Now, one thing to recognize, and I'll say this analogy with all three types, and it's so funny how this is different for all three types, but think of a 2-liter Coke when we think of anger. The type 8s are like a 2-liter Diet Coke with the lid off of it. And it's like Mentos are being thrown in to this 2-liter Coke, and that's circumstances being challenged, people not doing what they should be doing, maybe injustices, and all these Mentos are being thrown in, and it's this instinctual, visceral reaction that happens instantaneous. And you'll know this if you are around type 8s. It's not like ready, aim, fire. It's just fire and then maybe ready, aim. And And it is this gut reaction that you're going to find with eights. And a lot of times that can then spew out and land on other people like, whoa, like, what? Why are you so angry? Why are you so intense? And the eights are usually like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not that angry or I'm not that intense. I mean, yeah, I'm feeling a little something here. And so they don't realize the intensity and um, the scope that their energy can land on other people. That's why I like the analogy of this 2 liter Coke and Mentos popping in, because to them, they're just releasing the energy that has been I wouldn't even say built up, because it doesn't really even stay built up in them. It just releases very quickly. So, Libby, I would just love to hear, is this true? And if it's true, can you just share us like your insights and maybe a story of how this instinctual knowing comes out?
Yeah, absolutely. I was laughing through that whole description because it's so perfect. And I love the 2 liter Coke. I hadn't heard that before. So
Oh,
it is so visual for me, that spilling out on other people. But when I was growing up, my mom always said that I had strong discernment. And so when you talk about that instinct and the intuition, that's always the word that
Mhm.
comes up for me, is that discernment that I've always had. And then on the flip side of that, I got told a lot that I was too much.
mm, yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, the things that you're saying is that it's like it's too much anger, it's too much instinct, it's too much of that spewing on everyone else. And that was a message that I got a lot when I was growing up. But a lot of what I relate to that gut center is the idea of like embodiment, right? Like I get flushed when I get angry. It might come
Mhm.
out as tears sometimes. Yes, eights do cry, but it's usually
Yes.
out of anger and not
Okay.
out of sadness or hurt. And like my heart rate will start racing. So my husband and I have a joke because sometimes he'll say things that I don't agree with or are outside of my control, and my watch will tell me to calm down because
Yeah.
my heart rate is going so fast
Oh,
because
that's
That's
incredible.
that's so
yeah,
helpful.
right?
Wow.
But it's because I'm like embodying that
Yes.
anger also.
Mhm.
And those Mentos are like coming into me and I'm getting shaken up. And so that has also helped me to kind of check in with it, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like if I can feel that flush or if I can feel my heart rate going, my watch is telling me to calm down, then that's when I can start to actually check in with it instead of suppressing it or ignoring it.
Mm.
And I loved what you were saying about it being passion instead of anger, and like
Yeah.
intensity in a good way. Because I tell all the companies I work with that like my goal is to give eights a better rap.
Right.
Now, Libby, it sounds like you've done some work around the energy level that you bring to situations. In regards to your family of origin, how did they relate to your passion and
Mm.
energy?
I've still gotten that too much, even from the family.
Yep.
And, honestly, in our family, the Enneagram has helped us to understand each other and to
Yeah.
heal. Even my relationship with my parents. My sister and I actually used the Enneagram to really heal our broken relationship as
Mm.
adults. She's a 1, Christy am, and I'm
Ooh,
an 8.
that's a little
So
spicy to have
Yeah,
some
a little
kids, an 8 and a
spicy.
1.
right. And in a lot of ways, we showed up similarly, right? And
Yeah,
we
Okay.
were
right.
both strong, we're both
Yep.
passionate, but understanding that we do it for different reasons
Yeah.
was huge for us. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
I often share that story, when I'm doing keynotes or working with teams, because it just right off the bat shares how this tool can be transformational.
Libby,
Absolutely.
it's interesting for 8s and 1s because they carry a little bit of the message behind is first that maybe parents weren't enough. Now, it's different though because 8s are like, you're not strong enough to handle the situation, but 1s are, you're not doing a good enough job
Mm.
in parenting me. Do you think that was a little bit a part of the dynamic for you? Is that your parents' type, like maybe they weren't as they weren't showing up as strongly as what you had hoped?
Well, my mom's probably going to listen to this, Jeff. So,
Yeah,
no,
sorry
Hey,
to get
no,
my
into
parents
counseling in
my
public.
parents listen too. I get it.
it's okay. We've reflected on this. My dad's a 7 and my mom's a 5. And so they're both in the head triad, right?
Yep.
I do think that there was a message a lot of times of not tapping into your feelings.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest, so I think that the family dynamics there also was like sometimes I was an afterthought when I was following the baseball or the softball or whatever it was, and then the third child's there. So I definitely
Mm.
think that those aspects came into play, but it wasn't as much for me like a traumatic part in childhood. My dad says I just woke up one day and was like, I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go along anymore. I'm not going to just be in the wagon at the baseball field. And that
Yeah.
it was just, that was it. I was done.
Yeah.
And then I've been like that the rest of my
Well,
life.
it's interesting, like just hearing your family dynamics. The five, is very logical. Your sister's very logical. Your dad's like, let's all be positive, and you're just like, no, let's be authentic and real. And the types fours, sixes, and eights, they are emotionally reactive types. And so even though you're in the gut center and you have this visceral response, it also carries with it a lot of emotions. And here you're in a family dynamic that it's either be positive from dad's angle, or mom is like, can we just not do the emotions? Can we just think through this logically? And your sister's like, can you please do what's right? And you're like, guys, let's be authentic and real here. You can see how that can feel a little topsy-turvy for you in that relational dynamic. Does that seem true?
100%. And that's still the dynamic, right? Like, I want to
Yeah.
talk about it. And,
Yeah.
even other
Oh,
members of my
look at
family are
you
like,
coming in as a truth teller.
right? Yeah. Like, I'm like, let's not brush it aside. Like, let's
Mhm.
get to the core of it. Let's be honest. Let's be open. That conflict, it's not a dirty word to me. And
Right.
it really is to so many others and everyone in my family. And so
Mhm.
then it is this matter of like, do I push through that or do I let it go? And I think in a lot of my kind of emotional maturity, I have let go of some of that because of that snowplow.
Mhm.
I'm not just going to plow over them if they're not ready to have those conversations
Yeah.
and they're not ready to engage in that. So I think that that's like a balance.
Mhm.
Oh,
Some of
absolutely.
that
Sure.
is
Yeah.
good boundaries,
Yep.
but it has been something that I've had to learn.
Now,
Yeah.
Libby, I would imagine that, do you have children?
I do. I have two. I have a 9-year-old who's a self-proclaimed one.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's good that I learned to relate to my
Oh,
sister, right?
sure.
And then I have a 6-year-old little girl, and I am pretty sure she is my karmic retribution. I'm pretty sure she's gonna slide into that
Is
8.
that an Enneagram type? I don't know if anyone's ever given a type that name, but karmic retribution.
No, that she's an 8 and that she's like my karma,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to deal with her, and we are so much alike.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this also shows up in your coaching relationships. So whenever you start to see someone who maybe is processing or relating to a hurdle or a barrier to their own personal growth, your response is, that I've never come across something that doesn't move and get out of my way.
Mhm.
But you're trying to do this for other people. And so
Mhm.
you're having a response and they're having a response to this obstacle. How have you learned to use the gift that you bring while also affirming their process for
Mm.
growing?
Absolutely. That's a great question because I did have to learn early on that I could not control them and I could not control the outcome of the coaching.
Mm.
And I wanted to, even working with teams early on, I wanted everyone to like decide their core type and be ready to have the conversation.
Yep.
And sometimes people just aren't there yet. And so I had to learn to kind of push myself out of the way so that I could lean into that. But interestingly, I've actually had clients specifically seek me out because I'm an 8, because they
Mhm.
want a little bit more of that 8 to rub off on them. And they
Yes.
want me to kind of help them lean into some of those 8 traits. And so
Mhm.
that's been fun because it's just like, okay, let me share a little bit with you about who I am and and why I am the way I am, right?
Yeah.
And helping people to kind of tap into some of those more positive traits as well.
Yeah.
So it's been on both sides. Like I've had to take myself out of the way and I've had to use the gifts that I have to share with others.
Now, with the type 8, with this anger, this imbalance of anger that all three of us, the 8, 9, and 1 has, for you, there's just a lot of energy, a lot of intensity, a lot of the desire to challenge and to get going. In fact, eights are like, hey, that is where I feel most alive, when I'm pushing hard and I'm exerting and I'm not stopping. And what I tell people a lot of, I mean, obviously we got the snowplow analogy and we've got the 2-liter Coke, but another one is like lights in a room that are turned all the way up, the dimmer switch all the way up to 100%. And, someone might walk and go, whoa, that is really bright. And you're like, I know, isn't it great? Like, it brings life and energy. And everyone else is like, can you just like simmer it down just a little bit, like turn it down. And actually is helpful for an 8 to recognize, because what 8s don't realize is even though they feel alive by exerting all of this energy, is that they wear themselves out. They don't even know that it's happening until their body shuts down and is like, I can't do this anymore. Maybe they get sick. It could be lots of things. And their body's just like, no more. And so what I'm trying to encourage my clients that are type 8s is, hey, we're just talking about dialing it back to like 85. Like I'm a 9, I'm at 30%. I need to dial it up to maybe 40 or 50 if I'm lucky. But for the 8, we're like, hey, you're still intense at 85, but we don't want you to burn yourself out. Can you kind of describe what it feels like as a type 8 to be at 100% and why that just feels so great, but also, and how it's hard to quote unquote edit yourself back to 85? And how have you seen that been beneficial, but extremely hard to do?
It is hard because sometimes I don't want to dial myself back, right? Like, it's
Right.
like, this is just who I am, and should I have to change for other people's comfort, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's part of that internal struggle.
Yeah.
But it's funny you use that analogy. My very first boss told me that my 50% was everyone else's 100%.
Yeah,
And that was something
absolutely.
that kind of stuck with me, because it also goes back to my expectations of other people.
Yep.
Like, I tend to be more like, well, just get on my level then.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Like,
instead
this isn't hard, people.
That was a pregnant pause.
like, instead of me dialing back, why don't you rise up?
Yeah.
And so that is it is an internal struggle. And
Mhm.
I think that idea of being too much, I've pulled a lot of 8 women, because
Mhm.
we get that kind of
Yeah.
misnomer that we're misunderstood. It's not necessarily how women are supposed to show up. And that idea of being too much comes up a lot. So
Yeah.
I do think that there is a healthy, safe, percentage that you can dial back a little bit.
Yep.
But how do you find that line that you are not turning yourself off?
Yeah. And I think that's so, so helpful to say, because as a coach, my goal is to definitely keep my 8s as 8s. We need you to be an 8. God created you to be an 8. We need those snow plows to plow our path, for us, to help us. But at the same time, dialing it back is also a healthy benefit for the 8. It's not just about other people. It's also about ensuring your own personal health and self-care. Can you kind of talk about what you've felt and experienced when you've done self-care
Mhm.
by pulling it back just a little bit?
Yeah. And I think part of that too is understanding that dialing it back a little bit, it's not changing me, right? It's
Yes.
growing. It's leaning into
Hmm.
these more healthy tendencies. And so I think sometimes it's like redefining that in my head, that this is
Mhm.
actually good for me to be in that space, and it's not about changing me into something that I'm not. But
Right.
meditation, prayer. I've actually really found that just like stream of consciousness journaling is really
Mm.
good for me to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Because when I can just kind of get it all out and then look at it a little more logically, right?
Right.
That
Let
sometimes
the
that can
mento spewing
right,
happen on the paper, and then yeah.
tap into it.
Right.
And I also got some advice recently about letting my emotions out in ways that feel safe for me. And so almost like scheduling that time in ways that I know that I can be emotional and I can tap into those emotions,
Yeah.
but I know that I'm not going to have to like turn around and do a presentation right afterwards, or that I need to be present for
Hmm.
my kids right afterwards.
Right.
And so even like scheduling time to feel the feels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
and
that's
so
and
great.
you
good.
right? And it sounds kind of funny to like schedule that, but honestly, as an 8, that feels doable to me. It feels
Mm.
more comfortable to me, and it also feels like I'm controlling that environment in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Cool.
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. You ready to
Let's
head
go to
on?
type 9.
We'll head into my world with Christy
The
Erickson.
type 9's world. You don't own the 9 world,
Maybe I
Beth.
do.
She can't do that.
She can have
Okay,
it.
so the 9s, when we're doing well, we're very receptive, we're reassuring, we're open, non-judgmental, and we love to encourage others. We want to create peace and a harmonious atmosphere for others to experience so that they can flourish. But when we're struggling, we are resisting both the external environment and our internal fears and anxiety. So we just talked about the 8s, and they're really pushing against the external environment. But now you got the 9s, and they're like, okay, I don't want the external environment bothering me and disrupting my peace, and I don't want my internal world doing it either. So what do? Well, we try to suppress our anger, or that passion or the intensity, aggressive feelings that we might have, and just shut it out, just shut it down. But that doesn't really help, does it? So here we are trying to suppress all of this that's going on, and it really just builds inside. So the analogy here, again, is the 2-liter Coke, but instead of it being like an 8 where it has no lid on it and Mentos are being thrown in and it just is exploding, this really quickly, for the 9, our 2-liter Coke has a lid on it and it is tight. And the world and our emotions and everything external and internal are shaking it up, and we feel all of this pressure. But we want to be open and receptive. We want everyone to feel great. And so we're like, I need to put this 2-liter Coke over here. So we'll withdraw. We'll go put our 2-liter Coke like on a shelf. Maybe we're taking a nap. Maybe we're outside. Maybe we're just literally shutting down mentally and emotionally. But it's all because we instinctively know that this is going on inside us, but we don't even want to own it. We don't want to talk about it. We just want it to go away. And so that's when you'll find us 9s withdrawing or literally just shutting down in your presence. I don't know if Jeff, do you ever experience this?
There are conversations where I have to ask you, like, are you leaving this conversation?
Yeah. Or I'll be like, hey, and because my body literally will start to shut me down, and I can start to notice I'm not even like really hearing him. I can't even pull up words. I'm so overwhelmed, or maybe I'm sad, which anger is rising
I
up.
can't imagine what Libby is thinking right now, hearing you experience this. Like, that is just another planet.
So for me, at least, I know that this 2-liter Coke is going to like explode if I don't get it away from this circumstance, or if I can't disengage from it, disassociate from it. And that's my greatest fear, is for it to then spew and disrupt relationships or harm others. And so I would rather withdraw or shut down than have any of that happen. Now,
I remember a time
do erupt though.
You do erupt. And I remember one specific time hearing you think about that, because you had asked me, we'd just gotten onto the highway near our home, and you said, like, it just 5 minutes down the road, you just asked me the question, like, you've been very quiet. I'm just curious, what have you been thinking about since we've gotten on the highway? And I just listed off a number of items.
Like, we'd only been driving for like maybe 5 minutes, and you probably took 10 or 15 minutes to list out all the things that you have been thinking about in those 5 minutes.
And you got upset with me.
I was so overwhelmed.
They weren't even your thoughts. They were mine.
I'm like, whoa, like you just dumped like a dump truck of worries and thoughts and possibilities and preparedness. And I was like, dude, I just can't.
I just can't.
I'm sure all 9s are like, yes.
Is a phrase that I have often heard.
Yeah, I can't. I just can't.
I just can't. And it's that way. I can't. I just can't. The more she thinks about Jeff's world, I don't want to say that you've said you're too much.
But you are sometimes too much. Well, let's be honest. Every type is too much for the 9s.
I don't know. I think they might like 5s.
No, they can
I do like 5s.
Yeah, but they can be too much if they start on a passion of theirs, like something, and they just keep talking and talking and talking and talking and like giving us all the data points. If there's a point where we're like, yeah, that's a lot.
Yep.
So, but you probably won't know, because we'll shut down internally and nod our head and be like, oh, this is great. Right, Christy?
Yes, we'll be doing this.
Yes. Yeah, this is great. So, Christy, what has your experience been like as a type 9 where you are feeling the external world caving in to your peace and harmony that you're trying to create, and then so it's shaking your 2-liter Coke that has a lid on it. It's starting to shake up. It's building all this pressure. And so now you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. What is that experience like for you?
It is overwhelming. I
Mhm.
mean, that's the short answer.
Yeah.
I think when I think about my life before Enneagram, like before knowing anything about it, using it as a tool for growth, I can see so clearly how much of my life was organized around avoiding, avoiding a lot of feelings, but
Mm-hmm.
especially the feelings of anger.
Yeah.
Like just the ability to be able to identify my own anger, which I'm sure Libby, you do not even relate to this, but just identifying my own anger and seeing it was really, really hard for me.
Yes.
And also, just when I think back, I was so very unskilled with knowing what to do
Mm.
with it once I saw it. I think just being in the presence of anger, whether that's in somebody else or having to acknowledge my own, it just always felt dangerous and scary to me.
Yeah.
And so,
And what
and
was
I
the
remember.
why was it dangerous? What was the fear? What was it going to harm?
Yeah, I think it was a couple things. I was afraid that in acknowledging my own anger, like what was the harm maybe that I would cause?
Yeah.
How would I express my anger? Because as I said, I was very unskilled,
Yeah.
not knowing how to give voice to my anger. And so that fear alone of like the harm that I could cause in expressing my anger was really big for me.
Mm.
And uh, I think also because nines, we have this really largely almost entirely negative view of anger anyways, which
Mm.
is that anger is this really bad thing that only leads to other bad things, which just
Mhm.
anger is going to always lead to conflict, which is always going to lead to disconnection for us.
Mhm.
And the fear of disconnection for me in my relationships is a huge driver for me. I mean, I look back and realize what a big driver it was for me to keep that all tamped down, just
Mm.
keep it suppressed, like nothing's going on here,
Mhm.
and how much energy I was expending doing it. It's exhausting to do that. And I just think the whole process of getting in touch with my anger has been a journey for me. As you know, Beth, I know you relate to this. I think when the feelings of anger take over, and as a gut type, I feel it first. So I do feel anger in my body.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like my heart starts racing too. I relate to what Libby was describing. My heart's racing. I feel almost like this ball of adrenaline has been dropped into my body. I'm all
Mhm.
amped up on the inside.
Yep.
And um, and that just feels overwhelming and scary. And I don't and as nines tend to do when we get overwhelmed like that is, Beth, I've heard you say this many times. You describe it's like a fog machine going on in our minds. We
Mhm.
just don't have the clarity in the moment to know what is going on.
Yeah.
Why am I what am I even feeling? What am I thinking? I just don't have connection really to that. It takes me a while I have to withdraw. I have to kind of go away, get clarity about that
Yeah.
because I rarely know in the moment. I
Right.
just know that I'm feeling all just kind of amped up.
Well, and I think
Um,
Jeff would, and let me know if this is true for you. Jeff, when let's say our kids were younger and they would do something that upset me, he's like, "Well, what's going on?" And I'm like pointing out the obvious, like the iceberg, that the part that's above the water. Well, they
yeah.
did this and they did that, and he's like, "I know, but what's going on in you? Like what?" And I'm like,
Mm,
And
"Well,
then
I'm
and then
upset."
the
And then I
anger.
would I would say it again, like, "Well, they did this and that." And he was just
What do you want from me?
exactly. Like, I don't know. And
yeah.
um and I'm glad that you brought that up because it's 100% true for us nines, very opposite of the eights, like what Libby experiences. She has immense clarity in
Yes.
a what's like a millisecond is what I was going to say. In a millisecond, she knows exactly what's upsetting her and
Mhm.
why and how to articulate it in the moment. Whereas for us, like you said, this fog comes up. Now we know we're feeling like a 2-liter Coke, all that pressure that's built up. And it's just like,
Mhm.
I've got to expel it, but I can't because I'm so afraid of what it's going to do to all my relationships and myself. So we have this
Mhm.
huge fear. So then we try to keep the lid on it. And then all of a sudden, all that pressure just brings in like a fogginess, an unawareness that all we're thinking about is how to get out of the circumstance, to
Yeah.
calm the internal world down. And therefore, we can't fully know or express ourselves in a way that is actually beneficial for us and the other person. Because I think a lot of times when I'm talking to Jeff, he's like, he just wants some clarity. And I'm meandering around the whole situation, one, out of self protection, also because I don't know what I'm feeling. And that can
Yes.
actually create more conflict than
Yes.
what and so we just want to go away. And we'll go away. We're exhausted. We might go take a nap or,
Yes.
whatever it is that each nine does to disassociate. Does this sound true for you as well?
Yes. We are notorious for not being very clear in the way that we communicate with whenever we've got any kind of feeling or emotion that feels uncomfortable to us. So
It's
I
kind
have
of like
really had to learn.
it's kind of like
Go
our
ahead.
muscles in this area are atrophied.
Oh,
And
yes.
where we're like the bodybuilders,
Yes.
we're empathetic, we are receptive, we're non-judgmental, we receive people as they are. That's where we're like the bodybuilders,
Mhm.
in the Enneagram space. But man, when it comes to knowing ourselves and our inner world and communicating it well, that is where we have a lot of atrophy that we really need to work on. And it's scary, but the more we work on it, tell us a little bit what it's been like as you've gotten to know yourself and worked on expressing yourself, maybe in the moment or close to the moment, and how that has affected your relationships.
Sure. Well, the inroad to me in discovering my anger came through the back door of anxiety.
Mm,
So, so years ago, I was in therapy. This would have been in my early 20s. Let's see. No, early 30s. This has been 20 years ago. I landed myself in therapy because I was struggling with a lot of anxiety. I didn't understand what was going on. Why was I so anxious? And as you do in therapy, you kind of are unpacking some of your old stories.
right.
And I remember talking about a particular memory with this therapist. And this is not a joke. I remember her looking at me in the face with that really compassionate therapist face and saying, "Wow, I just wonder how very angry you were at that time and maybe still are about that."
Mm,
And no kidding, I looked this woman straight in the face, probably with a smile on my face, and I said to her, "I don't think I could conjure up a feeling about that if I tried."
mm,
And that is how disconnected I was.
yep,
Like, I knew I was anxious, but I didn't know that I was angry.
yep.
And so what I had to really learn in that season of therapy was how to connect myself to my emotions.
Hmm.
And in doing so, I was really essentially learning how to feel things.
Yep.
And then as I began doing that, guess what I realized? I was actually really angry.
Hmm.
The problem was then, what do you do with that anger? And I was also learning that season was so helpful for me because it taught me something about anxiety. So anxiety is that thing that I define anxiety, and my favorite definition of anxiety, I should say, comes from Christian therapist Adam Young, who I know you
Mm,
guys know,
yep. He's great.
love him. Right? He says anxiety is okay. Hold on a second. I have to pause here
Yeah, you're fine.
because I don't want to misquote him. I don't care if I misquote myself, but
He's an 8, he can handle
I know. I know
it.
he is an eight. That's funny. Um, okay, here it is. He says, so Adam Young says, anxiety is what you feel when you are avoiding important emotions.
Mm,
Anxiety is when you push down important core emotions like sadness, grief, and anger. So the thing was, I was getting in touch with those emotions. I was realizing I'm actually really angry. But then the problem was, what do I do with that anger now? Because if again, my perception of anger at that time was really largely so negative. Anger was that thing that always led to conflict, which was always bad,
Mhm.
from my perception. And that conflict always led to disconnection.
yeah.
So the way that I've kind of had to do a lot of work around this and get in touch with my anger, and then um, learning how to express it. It's a practice I still actually have to do now. I'm sure Libby cannot relate to this, but it's something I have to do even still today, which is to practice giving expression to it. And that just means I have to create space in my life, in my relationships, for the healthy expression of my anger. I
Yeah.
mean, that just looks like I have to be willing to give voice to it, maybe even in the moment, which always feels pretty hard and scary for me. It feels really vulnerable.
Yeah.
I have to be willing to risk conflict, and challenge that belief that conflict always leads to disconnection, which is
Mm.
not true. As we know, like conflict, when handled rightly, leads to greater connection and deeper
Exactly.
intimacy. The other thing that I really have to remember, having learned this lesson about anxiety, is that my emotions, and especially my anger, it's always going to seek an exit from my body. And
Yep.
I have the choice. I can open the door for my anger,
Wow.
hopefully in that practice of like expressing it in some form that's healthy, or I can suppress it, which of course never leads me to anything good. But
Yep.
in that suppression, all that just means is my anger later is going to just open the door for me. And the problem with that is by the time it does that, that will not be on my initiative.
Mhm.
I will not have control over when or how that gets expressed.
Mhm.
And this is when people will start experiencing that anger shooting out sideways for me. Like I
Yeah.
might get really passive aggressive all of a sudden, or really stubborn, as nines can tend to do, or I just shut
What?
down completely
So,
and withdraw.
Christy,
Yeah.
interested about this because my impression is an experience of you is that you have a strong one wing. Is that correct?
I have a very strong one wing.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've been
And Beth
practicing
does
getting in
as
touch with my
well.
8 wing.
Yeah. It comes
But
more
Yeah.
out
your eight wing
in
is
work.
yeah, but your eight wing is strong. I don't know if they're stronger than the other, to be quite honest with you. I've got a relationship with both of them.
Because we
And
work together too.
that's right. But I am curious. So Beth, when you experience anger, what's the fear of when the anger comes out?
um,
That you're going to hurt people?
I'm gonna either hurt people, and I think because that kind of that whole understanding of that we have our muscles are atrophied in this category, that I'm not gonna even know how to use these muscles well. And so, yeah, that I'm gonna hurt others, or I'm gonna say things that I don't even mean because I'm not well nuanced in my emotional slash anger language. And
Yeah.
so by even just opening my mouth, what I've experienced over a lifetime is that when I express myself, the response that I get from others, now this is through the grid of the 9 lens,
Mm-hmm.
is that they're upset, they're hurt, they don't like what I said, I didn't say it right, I could have said it better,
Well,
or
you have a little bit of I'm too much, or
well,
you
don't
don't
assert
want me to have
yourself.
feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the false negative childhood message for the 9 is don't assert yourself. So here I asserted myself, but I usually get pushback. And now another person might be thinking, oh, we're just dialoguing, like we're having a good conversation. And I'm like, no, this is conflict. And so,
Yeah. And it's bad.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
bad. It's wrong. Like now you're upset and I didn't make you happy. And now I'm bad. Now you're not going to
Mhm.
love me. That's the result of it all. So then we try to
So,
repress it, and it becomes like she said, passive aggressive or stubbornness or withdrawal, and it only creates more conflict.
so Christy, you're with your
Yes.
inner critic. What does your inner critic say about your anger?
My inner critic largely says pretty much what Beth was saying, that
Okay.
that I'm not going to be I'm not going to be skilled in being able to express my anger in a way that, my heart wants to do it. My heart wants to somehow be able to express it in a way, of course, that's very respectful and honoring, that isn't going to escalate conflict. And so there's the inner critic there a little bit is going to be um, judging me a bit, or overly
Mm-hmm.
critical about how I might express that. And of course, this I think that speaks to another struggle that nines tend to have, which is we can tend to hold this kind of false belief that to some degree we can manage or control other people's feelings.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and it's all about, sometimes me not expressing my anger is me thinking that I'm protecting other people
Yeah.
from me, from how I might express that and do harm.
Right.
I mean, Beth
And I
has
used to
never thought that she could control my emotions, ever.
Right.
that is amazing.
Yes. No. If I'm
But I
happy,
should
if I'm
think,
positive, then everyone else is
Oh,
gonna be right.
right,
sure.
yes.
And a matter of fact, it shows up in a negative way that whenever I am melancholy,
Yeah. I
you assume that it's all your
well,
fault.
I merge with the energy and then
Yes. But
Yes.
merging also makes us more angry because merging does that thing where it triggers us that old belief too that my presence doesn't really matter. I
Yeah.
don't have a voice,
yeah.
right? My voice doesn't matter. So it's a cycle. I,
Yeah.
I think the cycle that we can get into is that we suppress, then just the discomfort of the suppression leads us to numbing.
Yeah.
And then the numbing, we get stuck there. Everything's foggy. I feel like it's almost like the engine inside of me just slows
Yeah.
down.
Mhm.
I feel a bit dead on the inside. I lose my sense of momentum and just feeling alive and awake.
Yep.
So it's a bad cycle. At the
Yeah.
same time, the more I practice giving expression to it, and as you guys know, this is the great news about practicing new things. The more you practice it, every experience builds upon the last, right? And my brain has started to figure out, oh, okay, when we're angry, we go this direction now. We move toward expression, not suppression.
Mhm.
And then kind of that new neural pathway, if you think of it that way, that gets further cemented every time you do it, is great because now my default a little bit is to go toward the practice of expression, less suppression, because the fear of getting stuck in the trap of suppression, numbing, disconnection is greater for me now than
Yeah.
the fear I used to have of just expressing my anger.
And I love
Well,
that. And we'll move on to Christy with a C for
I
type
do have a
1. But
question for Christy with a C about something that you've mentioned
okay, Christy with
with her, yeah. But I want to ask it before we start on the type 1. But go
Okay.
ahead and finish your thought.
Oh,
Yeah. So what I love about that is, when a 2-liter Coke is shaken up, we are trying to put it on the shelf, which is our withdrawal or
Yeah.
passive aggressiveness, thinking that that is going to release that pressure, and it actually doesn't. The best way is to slightly open and close, slightly open and close, slightly open, so that it's not
Mhm.
spewing everywhere, but you're releasing the pressure. And that's what the 9
Yeah.
has to learn to do, is in the moment to do the best that we can to release the pressure, to express ourselves, to say what needs to be said. And the more we do that, the more we're going to feel when that pressure comes on, and that we actually need to release it quickly in the moment so that it doesn't build to such an uncomfortable place where our lid might pop off and it spews all over the place. So I just want to paint that picture for the 9s out there. Trust the Lord in that He has given you a voice, He's given you emotions, and learn. And there might be lots of different ways that you have to learn how to build these muscles and expressing your emotions and expressing what's going on. But it's so important that you do, because it's going to benefit you and it's going to benefit those that are around you.
Do you know what was the most helpful reframe for me was when I came to the realization that suppressing my anger, like pretending I'm not angry, um, denying that it's there. I thought I was protecting other people around me from my
Right.
anger. In
Right.
reality, what I was doing is I just wasn't telling them the truth.
Yeah.
So when I could see it through that lens of like, I'm not being truthful with the people that I care about, right?
Mm.
I could reframe it a little bit. And as I practice giving expression to anger, what I'm discovering is it actually keeps me feeling awake and alive. So I've had to reframe my thoughts about it, or like anger and I have had to kind of redefine our relationship a little bit. It's not my enemy. It actually can serve as this great fuel in a way to
Absolutely.
keep me in motion, to keep me from getting really foggy and numb and in that trap that I mentioned before. It keeps me
Well,
I
that's why
don't
we
lose
call it
momentum.
passion.
Yes.
Anger isn't always this bad thing. It's
Yeah.
passion, it's
I
fuel.
feel more awake when I
Right.
practice voicing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure we get to one, but I was going to ask a question, Christy with a C, and who's a fitness and health coach,
Type
but
1.
that you were using the term atrophy, and I wondered if that was a self-determining or limiting belief that you have this muscle that has atrophied versus thinking you have a part of you that is ready to go when you are, but you're choosing not to steward it. So it's not that it needs strength, it already has it. And I'm curious, Christy, like whenever you're working with people with their bodies and maybe they're fearful, like, oh no, I can't do that particular exercise or I'm not ready for it. But you know that on experience, like, no, your body is waiting for your mind to go for it because it's ready to grow. Does that resonate with you, Christy?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, and especially, on the other hand, when a muscle is atrophied, just because it hasn't been in use,
Mm-hmm.
you have muscle memory. So, in regards to what you're saying, if you um are not thinking clearly or whatever, but it is something that
Yeah.
you have done in the past, but you got on that hamster wheel or whatever,
Yeah.
um, it could have atrophied, but it has the memory to know if you flip this script, I have done this before. I am strong in this.
Mm.
Oh,
I
that's
don't,
interesting.
I don't
That's
know if that
right.
makes sense.
Yeah. 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 Because I experienced that having been an athlete, and then whenever I do have seasons where I am exercising regularly, my body remembers,
Hmm.
and I'm just bringing it back online. But we happened to be at a retreat recently, and someone, uh, s- uh, a real cowboy, saddled a horse in our presence who had never been ridden before, had a saddle. And most of the conversation was about this horse is going to resist something that actually it was made for. Like it's gift. Like it has all of the strength necessary, and we're going to put this horse to greater purpose than it has within itself. And I think that when I think about nines and that term, just being curious about it, but it made me think of that experience of that horse is ready to go. It just needs leadership. And for the nines to think that it's not that I'm somehow disabled or weakened, but the strength needs to be unleashed. But it also needs to be directed.
Right.
Because if it's not directed, then you've got like the issues of the eight of misdirected anger. And you're dropping atomic bombs in the room, and let's just see what kind of fights we can get into here in the moment.
This is going to be fun.
So why don't we go ahead and dive into type
Yeah.
one?
Yeah. So we'll dive into Christy with an M, it starts with a C.
Christy with a C, yeah,
Yeah.
not Christy with an M.
Well, I mean,
Although
her last
name isn't M.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's what I was thinking. All right, so the type ones, now when type ones are aligned with the gospel and they're really healthy, they're going to exhibit wisdom and conviction because they have this ability to be impartial with whatever circumstance they're in. They have this gut knowing of what's right and wrong, what's fair, what's reasonable, what's principled. And so they're going to bring that to the forefront, which we absolutely need. But when they're misaligned, it's going to actually stir up a few more things in the internal world. So they're going to start to feel resentment and anger in the internal world because things aren't perfect. And their inner critic is really pointing things out in a very harsh, demanding way. Like, we have to have this right and perfect. And so they are trying to disconnect, or not disconnect, but to repress or get away from what's happening in their internal world, which is the feeling and the knowing that something's wrong. And that just brings up a whole heap of issues for them. And so you're going to find that instead of suppressing, they're repressing the feeling of anger. But it's there. And so they have their ideals. They know what needs to be in order, what needs to be consistent. And so for them, they're going to really try to hone in on what is right and what's wrong. But unfortunately, it can come out as criticism. It can come out as being nitpicky, judgments, on to others. Now, they don't necessarily always know that it's coming out that way. In fact, a lot of times they're thinking that they're just bringing justice to the forefront and they are helping. But that's not how it always lands on other people. So let's paint this picture again with the 2 liter Coke. Now, we talked about what the 8s are like and what the 9s are like, but for the 1, it's like they're a 2 liter Coke with the lid half on, half off. So it's, it's loose. And so then the world, with all its imperfections, are shaking this 2 liter Coke. And so it comes out sideways, right? So it's going to spew, but it's going to come out sideways. It's not going to be as intense and direct as the type 8, and it's not going to be suppressed like the type 9 and then explode. It is repressed. And so it's going to come out sideways. Now, to them, they're thinking, but this needs to be said. This is right and this is wrong. This needs to be fixed. I'm just helping everyone. But it can land on other people because it's spewing outwardly. It can land on other people as that criticism. It can feel like they're being put down or they're being put in their place or being taught, corrected. And so they're, for the 1, it's kind of like, but I'm helping, And so, Christy, can you help us to understand if this is accurate and true? And if so, how has this played a role in your life?
Yeah, that is true. It's really interesting about that because when I was really digging into the Enneagram, I didn't really think about that I had a problem with expressing my anger. And I think that it's because, I mean, it all depends on who I'm with. Obviously, the people that I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with, I don't have a problem with expressing it sometimes. However, now that I've dug into it, I can see where I do repress it and it does come out sideways as either maybe not even criticism sometimes, but just being, I don't know what the word is, just, I don't know, I guess just sideways, being, that word
Could it be,
to me.
what could it be? I know some people said cold or curt in their manner of talking.
Yeah, oh gosh, that word, yeah, curt and, it will come to me. But one example that I think of is, just recently, and usually it comes out more if I feel like, somebody that I really care about, if I see that they're being wronged,
Yeah.
then, then I can really feel that. And, my husband's a realtor and, with realtors, they, will, you know, go and do a market analysis on somebody's home and, put all this effort in and then
Mm-hmm.
later find out that they listed their house with somebody else. That's
Mm.
happened a couple times recently, and I mean, my anger, it kinda goes sideways, I guess sarcastic, I guess, is the word that I was
Uh-huh.
looking for. I get a little bit sarcastic, but um, in that way and just feel like that is just not right, you know? And, I wanna call that person and tell them how that's not right.
Yes.
Never let
Yeah.
it go that far though.
Yeah. And so as you've, heard from the 9 and the 8 and how they deal with their anger, how do you like, what does it feel like in your body? Because you guys are the body, center, the gut type. You have this gut reaction to injustice. And so what does that feel like internally? And what is your normal experience in expressing this anger or not repressing it? And what have you found some healthier ways in actually doing that?
Yeah, I definitely internally feel it. I think that Libby had said this too, and maybe even Christy. I don't know if we all feel it the same way as far as when I feel that I'm getting angry, I feel it like from the inside out, and my body starts getting warm. I can feel my heart rate get elevated. Um,
Hmm.
and what was the other part of the question?
Yeah.
Just
So then how do you go about whether expressing it or hiding it, repressing it? And then what are the healthier ways you've seen it be done for
yeah,
you?
yeah. So for me, because I am a yoga instructor too, has been so helpful for me
Hmm.
because when I feel that, I just take time to pause, take a
Perfect.
couple deep breaths, kind of evaluate the situation, what's really going on, where's this anger coming from,
Hmm.
and how can I redirect it?
Hmm. Yeah. And
And I'm
okay.
just curious, how does it From feeling it in your body, so you're starting to feel some energy, maybe your heart rate's up. Um, and then, I mean, I'm assuming that the one part of you is going to want to control all of that and tamper it down. Okay, do what's necessary to calm it down. But at some point, do you ever notice in your mind that you become more vigilant about mistakes or errors around you? How does it show up in your thinking when you're starting to feel anger?
Y- Uh, yes, um, it all depends on how long. Like if I repress it, then I definitely start to, and kind of go about my day. I do notice that I'm more critical of myself, critical of others. I
Mm.
see, everything that's misplaced and not right. And so that's why I do try um, to deal with it as soon as possible. And a lot of times I think
Mhm.
that, my inner critic, a lot of times when I think about anger, I'm more critical of myself and get, more upset at
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
about things.
Yeah.
And Bethy, that's the sign of a particular subtype of type 1 when they're more
Right.
critical of themselves, right?
Yeah. So the self-preservation type
Yes.
1, is this what you are?
Yes, that is.
Yeah, so the self-preservation type 1 is going to look more at themselves and aim the criticism at themselves. The social is going to be, it's going to be kind of a hybrid where they're like, um, okay, we've got to make this right, and I got to do it right, and I've got to be the model and the role model and the mentor and the teacher so everyone can follow me and do it right. And so it's kind of like, okay, I got to fix myself in order to be that person. So it's a little bit of the same, but they're also frustrated with some of the people outside of them that might be contributing or hindering them from being that person. But then the one-to-one, or some people call it the sexual type 1, they're all about seeing all the errors out there, and they're going to name it, and they're going to bring reform and activism and, be the person who changes everything. So they're looking outside themselves, and it doesn't have to be other people necessarily. It could be what's happening in the world in general. So their anger is pointed outward.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why I bring all of this stuff up is because for me as a type 6, I have come to recognize when I start to feel lonely, there is some element of anxiety or fear, but I don't experience that first. It shows up as I'm alone, and I start thinking in terms of doing life alone. Now, this has nothing to do with Beth and our relationship. She could be as near to me physically and emotionally as possible, and yet I will still feel alone because there's something else going on. And it's interesting, like for the nines, I wonder if that feeling of desire to disassociate, to disengage, to put it on the shelf is the symptom that there's actually anger involved.
Oh, sure.
For the one, it sounds like, Christy, you were talking about when you start to become self-critical, that is the yellow flag that there's something else going on. Libby, what is it for you? How does kind of anger show up, but in a secondary? Is it like, I am ready to fight the world right now. I have so much energy inside.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah. I mean, I don't even feel like I have those flags. It's just like I feel it, I know it, I act on it. Right.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of talked about that a little bit too. But I think being able to then identify it ahead of time, it's like Christy with the K was talking about, the more you practice it,
Yeah,
the easier it becomes that I can start to identify it in advance instead of just acting on it and not
yeah,
processing it ahead of time.
awesome.
I think what you're mentioning, Jeff, is so helpful that every type has kind of a particular behavior that serves a bit as a wake up call. And numbing is for sure that for me. Numbing is that when I notice that I'm kind of checking out or foggy in my mind, or I suddenly, I have this deadline of something that I have to do that's due tomorrow, but suddenly it's like totally urgent. I have to clean my desk out right now, and I have to do laundry, and I've got to do 10 other things in service of not doing the thing that I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be doing. Any kind of numbing behavior or just escaping, wanting to flee. I mean, I can be such an emotional flight risk in those moments.
Mm.
That's my wake up call. It's
I
like the warning
love
light on
that
my dash.
term. an emotional flight risk.
I,
Beth may
it's
or
so
may not
true.
hear that in the future.
Yes, and it's like the warning light on my dashboard
Yeah.
to say something's going on. To me, it's the warning light that there are emotions there
There are
that
emotions. That's
I'm
right.
not paying attention to.
Yeah.
And it
Christy,
usually shows up in anxiety for me. That's
Mhm.
just how the way that it shows up for me, but it's anxiety. And then that leads me to that discovery of, okay, what's going on emotionally for
Yeah.
me
In
that I'm
IFS terms,
not.
internal family systems, they call it a trailhead. It's that first
Mm,
experience
yeah,
that we're
yeah,
not fully aware of, but if we
yes.
walk the path, it'll attune us to our real hearts.
Yeah, Christy with a C. What can you, after hearing everyone nuance, and we kind of talked about, the criticism, but can you kind of walk us through some other yellow flags or even paint a broader picture?
Yeah, yellow flags. Anytime that I feel anger, um, let me think for a minute. It's hard to get when you're in a good space. It's hard to remember,
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's
thoughts.
like, what? I don't have any
I'm
anger
blank.
issues. Things are going great.
Um,
Right.
um, yeah, I just anytime that for me, whether it's for myself or again, seeing injustice for somebody else is just for me the way that I feel in my body. I can tell right away when I'm going to
Mm.
start getting angry, and it's usually well, and actually one example the other day, I mean, and this was kind of silly, but I had to make a recipe for something for our life group at church on Sunday night. And being the one, I want to be all perfect and make sure that I have all my ducks in a row and stuff. And I looked at my recipe, thought I had all my things, and the day before, luckily, I realized that I didn't have the butter for it. And
Oh.
right away, it was a yellow flag that negative, um, that inner critic was coming to my mind of, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, what is wrong with you?
Mhm.
And so that can get me in a downward spiral. And then not wanting to ask for help, which my husband is more than happy to stop after he gets off of work to get it.
Yeah.
But I just make a
Yeah.
bigger deal out of it. And so, I just
Mhm.
have to kind of regroup a little bit and, think about, well, where is that coming from? Why are you getting so upset? And it's so funny
Yeah.
about the inner critic thing because until I started working on the Enneagram and learning more about myself, I thought that everybody had that.
Mhm.
And when I
Wow.
took the Enneagram test, I wanted so bad to be a 7 because they seemed like the fun people and didn't
Oh,
have
don't we
that,
all?
and so
Don't we all?
but it's
And
fun.
then you
I like being
learn,
a 1.
oh, they've got their stuff too.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
Yes,
Chrissy, I want to
we
ask
all
one
have
other
that
question.
stuff.
And I've never thought of this before, Beth, but I do wonder if it was a part of my life
mhm.
in relation to my anxiety. So in high school and college, I was a place kicker. And one of the things about place kickers in football is flexibility. And I'm not sure why they think it's such an important thing. I'm not, because I could kick a soccer ball forever, even before. But
Mhm.
starting my junior year of high school, throughout the week, I had a strength and conditioning coach that would stretch me for about 30 minutes. And Beth would look at,
It
when they're
was
in
weird.
college,
Let
she
me
was
just
like,
say,
what is that man doing to you?
it looked like a pretzel. I'm like, this can't be okay.
And, but it's interesting to think about that because, so Krista, you're a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
And I do wonder because I always feel an element of relief when I start to stretch in those ways. I immediately go back anytime I feel tightness, and you see me stretching sometimes at night, and I feel so much better about my life.
Yeah.
From stretching.
And it's not necessarily the pain of it because they overdid it and it was kind of crazy at times.
Yeah.
But Christy, tell us about how does yoga help you? But I'd love to frame it in this way. How does yoga help you with your inner critic and making
Mm.
it a bigger deal than it needs to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, just learning to slow down. And in my yoga classes, because it's Christ-centered, I always have an intention for the class. So we talk about peace and our
Mm.
thoughts, or, just different things. And for
Yeah,
me,
when
just,
when I was being stretched, we were not talking about those things.
no, I bet not. Yeah. Um, but just learning to slow down, and learning to breathe.
Mhm.
And there is something about, you know, moving your body in any way, but with yoga, I think slowing down and really stretching like that.
Mhm.
I mean, for myself, I just feel like the Holy Spirit is present in that, and that
Yeah.
you're releasing a lot of things that you don't even realize. And I've had people in tears in yoga, for reasons that they can't even explain. And the
Right.
same for myself, it's just a way.
Well, and
Um,
also,
yeah,
Christy, with type ones, they pretty much live their whole life believing that the inner critic was God or the Holy Spirit.
yeah,
And then we come around and I'm like, no, the Holy Spirit is not bringing judgment and shame and condemnation. The Holy Spirit is kind, goodness, love, peace, gentleness, like, the fruits of the Spirit.
right.
And what was that like when you had that aha moment?
So refreshing. And also even knowing that, um, just the revelation that there's only one person that's perfect, and it's definitely not me,
Mhm.
but the fruits of the spirit, that's really, that's a good analogy to think about that, all
Yeah.
those things.
Mm.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
Christy,
cool.
and all the rest of the numbers, just as an encouragement, if ones can't do it and be perfect, then none of the rest of us can. So
So let's just lean on Jesus.
Yeah.
Thank
that's
goodness
right,
for him.
because you're making the best attempt of all of us,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's still not hitting it.
Well, guys,
Yeah.
where can people find you? You're certified Enneagram coaches with YEC. So where can they find you? Tell us websites and social handles and all the great places that you guys are at.
Yeah, Libby, let's start with you.
Mhm.
All right. Well, again, I'm Expand Coaching and Consulting. So you can find me at www.expandcoachingandconsulting.com. But my Instagram handle is Enneagram2Expand. And that's where I am most active on social media. But I would love to chat and help anybody. My little tagline is challenging people to push beyond and expand their boundaries. So hopefully folks are interested in that and will reach out to me.
Great.
Thanks, Libby. And Christy with a K.
Yes, you can find me on the YEC network with
Awesome.
you guys,
Yep.
Okay.
and you can find me at overflowenneagram.com. And yeah, I would love to chat with you too. I I kind of work from this idea that everybody is leading somebody. We all
Mm.
are leading somebody, whether it's your children or your
Mhm.
friends or your colleagues or whatever. And I just like the idea that when it when it comes to serving, leaders do go last. I know that Simon Sinek says that when it comes to serving, leaders go last, but when it comes to growing, leaders go first.
Mm. That's
And
good.
I think so much, I spend a lot of my time thinking about the idea of who we are becoming in Christ, and who we are becoming matters.
Yeah.
So there you
That's
go.
great. Thank you.
Overflowenneagram.com and YEC Network.
Great. And Christy with a C.
Yeah, and I too am on the YEC network, and you can find me on Instagram, Christy, lowercase, lower dash Mishler, and then on Facebook, Fitness Training Unlimited, and
Great.
website too, fitnesstrainingunlimited.com.
Great. Well, guys, thank you so much. And for those of you that are interested in getting in touch with them, like they said, they're on our YEC Coaches Network and their directory. And all you got to do is go to myenneagramcoach.com. So, again, that's myenneagramcoach.com. Put their names in the search, and there they are. You can connect with them and learn more about them, or the websites and the Instagram handles that they told you. But Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you've really learned a ton about the gut triad, the eights, nines, and ones, whether that's you or someone that you love, and that this has been beneficial. We hope that you'll share it. We're also on YouTube, so check us out there and you can see all these beautiful faces. And we hope that if, for those of you that are interested and you just are always sharing the Enneagram with the next person and you can't help it, maybe you need to be an Enneagram coach like these three. So if you are interested, just email us at info@yourenneagramcoach.com and we'd be happy to have someone talk with you about what being a coach is all about. But as always, remember the Enneagram reveals your need for Jesus, not your need to work harder, because it's the gospel that transforms us. We'll see you next time.